share the lessons. And I think Jasmine just turned on the recording. So everybody be aware you're being recorded. And I'm now going to turn it over to Mark and Aaliyah to talk about how we want to move forward both today and in general. And I'm going to black myself out because, as I said to some people, my internet is not fabulously stable today. And if I don't show my video, my audio may be more stable.
Thanks, Deb, and good day. I won't say good afternoon because I'm not exactly sure where you are. The last time we all met like this was June 1st, which is only 9 days ago, but I feel like it's been months given everything that's happened since then. And I just want to note, you know, the enormity of what's going on right now. We won't necessarily talk about it today, but with George Floyd just being put to rest yesterday, people still in the streets, I think there's a mix of heartbreak and rage and even hope, and just wanted to note the moment. Aaliyah, anything you want to add? Okay.
No, thank you, Mark.
So today we are going to talk about virtual events. Aaliyah and I are not experts on virtual fundraising events because there are no experts in virtual fundraising events. Here's what I would propose to do. This is your time. So if some piece of this doesn't sit right, please speak up. I looked for something already prepared, some guide to virtual fundraising events, and I think there are going to be more of them in the world in the coming weeks and days. They do, oh, thank you, Aaliyah. They do exist, and I haven't found a good one. So what I propose to do is offer some very broad common sense rules for it. Invite Aaliyah to chime in anything that occurs to her, and then break you out and give you some breakout questions for 10 minutes and bring you back and see where we are.
May I add just a quick context setting question? May folks who are on this call, will you just very quickly put in the chat whether or not you already have a virtual event planned? Great. Or whether or not you're just considering it and wanting to find out about best practices. I know Joe has his on July 31st.
Jennifer's was last week.
Jennifer had hers last week. What about other folks? Anyone? Okay, great. Considering one from Jesse, thank you. An event in November, trying to determine what to do, none planned, but considering it. Have a virtual event, but not a fundraiser planned for August. Kid Forward did one last year, so we have someone pre-COVID who did this from Nicole. Thank you.
Nicole, you should be giving this workshop.
Great, and lots of folks considering it. So that's just some good context for us, Mark, as we facilitate the conversation.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's great. Super helpful. So I'm going to just go through these. Oh, I guess I have to share my screen, don't I? Like I said, work in progress.
While Mark is doing his virtual magic, if anyone has any feedback throughout the presentation or questions, just stack it in the chat and I'll make sure to raise those up for Mark. I think it'll streamline it for the time we have.
Thank you, Aaliyah. And I will probably say this 16 times in the next hour. We are all learning together, and we expect this conversation to continue. And I think something Deb said that maybe the most important thing is that we start to put in place some sort of way to rapidly disseminate whatever learnings happen. And this is the beginning of that. So with that said, I wanted to say a couple things about virtual fundraising events before, during, and after, and open things up either. Aaliyah, I cannot see the chat when I'm sharing the screen. So
I got it.
If anything brilliant comes up, that would be great. So we'll start with before. one of the things that I keep hearing, my wife's on a couple of boards, and we just hear things from other people, is that people who have had fundraising events have had some amount of turnout from people who are brand new to the organization. So one of the things about the before part is it's probably a really good idea to cast the net widely, to be on social, to go out to people who are not yet donors, because there's not a lot of downside to that. I just wanted to show and tell Jennifer's and Joe's. And Jennifer and Joe, we are going to want to hear from you at some point. And then the other piece of common sense, well, counterintuitive, not necessarily intuitive common sense, is it's probably really valuable to do a build up to the event. Both Aaliyah and I have been kind of blown away by BRC, which is a huge homeless care organization in New York. They, for a week, every other day, put out a profile of a hidden hero building up to their event, which was 2 nights ago, I think. I thought that was brilliant, and just anything you can do to create a drum roll. I don't think one invite is going to be enough, and as you get closer, building some expectation and excitement about it, I think it's going to be really important.
I also think that organizations that are doing this excitement build up and also taking the advantage of everyone complains about dinners and fundraising events, and this is a moment when we're having to re-envision them. So the idea of being able to try things and fail forward and really shake up the mold from what folks have expected or have come to expect might not be a bad thing to embrace at this point.
I think that's a really important point. This may end up being a blessing in disguise, because even when we began this cycle of pod meetings, I remember people talking about their desperation to get off of events, to get off of galas. And I think it would be easier to find an honest person than find someone who loves galas. So yeah, let's make the most of this opportunity. So obviously there are rules for during a virtual fundraising event that apply to the virtual part of it, and some of it is just common sense that we don't always see applied. I'll start with the last one first and go backwards. It's so critical not to have a lot of talking heads intoning about policy or whatever, or whatever. It's difficult in a live event, but at least they've got food in front of them. They've had a couple of drinks. They're just going to check out if it is boring. Jennifer had some amazing musical interludes in hers. There was one from Houston I was looking at this morning, which was incredibly entertaining. So just keep in mind that it needs to be fun if you're going to keep people engaged. So going back up to the, go ahead, Aaliyah.
One example, and this wasn't from a virtual event from a nonprofit, but a bar that's in my neighborhood. I live in Brooklyn, so we're still in phase 1 and far from opening up in any way, shape, or form. They have taken their trivia night online and do it virtual. And, to do like some kind of like, trivia question with, some kind of prize or something that's keeping folks engaged throughout, the event would be a really welcome idea.
I want to go to your trivia night.
I know. They've done it, like they really have beautifully transitioned it online, and folks are loving it.
That's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
That's so cool. I think in keeping with what Aaliyah said about this being an opportunity to re-envision fundraising events, don't just think about trying to transfer a gala or a big dinner online. You can use this for little teas with 5 or 6 major donors. I'm guessing some of you are already using this for face-to-face with donors. There are a lot of ways that this can be used, and you may find people who do not want to get dressed up and get in their cars and do all that stuff, who are going to be much more accessible and much more interested in hearing from you this way.
I was talking,
So,
Deb just added one advantage is that you can draw donors from all over your state. And I was talking to Mary Coogan in New Jersey,
Jersey.
and she was saying that she was, always has folks who complain that they can't attend the annual breakfast. And so now, as Debbie says, you widen the audience of people who can attend. And then Maddie Gregory said we had a successful trivia night in Indiana with McCoy too. So very cool.
I need a guide to the trivia nights. I think that's so cool. So Jasmine is going to send you, in the don't be boring category, Jasmine is going to send you this guide that I turned up, 20 virtual fundraising ideas during COVID-19. Obviously, it's not only COVID-19, it's for the foreseeable future. There is a trivia night in there somewhere, I think, a TED Talk style event. I know that ACLU just did a TED Talk style event to unveil their new defunding the police plan. So
Sarah Zybert in Michigan did like some just virtual like training sessions to prepare people for a run that they're planning on doing in the fall if they can. So just thinking again about not just transferring these things from okay, what do we do at the gala to online.
This is underscoring my belief that our job, Aaliyah, is less to teach and more to help do knowledge transfer, because it sounds like you are all already thinking about it, doing it, trying things. We just have to figure out how to capture that. One of the things that people are doing is capturing their event, because it's all capturable on video, and giving it a second life. Most people are doing what Tahare did, is just taking the video of it and putting it online. There may be ways of cutting up and reusing some of the material in other creative ways. So after the event.
Just before we leave, Deb also had a great idea that she's seen places where runs aren't really happening physically and everyone does their own run. So it's not a big gathering, right?
Someone I know is doing some sort of virtual run that doesn't involve running, which is my kind of run, but I don't remember the details of it. So after, this was something that that Jasmine shared with me. This is from, I'm not sure the name of the group, and if you're here, please raise your hand, because this was wonderful. It not only had music, it had, I think it was the executive director in a top hat. It was 42 minutes. I think they probably did a lot of things right. My favorite idea, by the way, and I don't want to let any more time pass as I look at Joe Dorman in a little box on my screen, is Joe is going to have the banquet meals delivered to people's homes, which I think is freaking brilliant. And Joe, fingers crossed. I think that's really pushing it to the max. So that is literally all I have to share. Aaliyah, I don't know if you have anything else. Oh, let me just finish the after. And that is, it's going to be easier and cheaper to follow up very quickly with thank you for being there. Thank you for taking part. Even you won't know if they logged in or not. Thank them anyway. Send them a link to the video, and use that as a jumping off point for maybe a short cultivation series.
Carly, hello. It's been a while. I'm so happy to see your name here. She texts in, that's amazing, in response to Joe. and that she delivered gifts to their participants ahead of the event, but not during. So, Carly, if you don't mind my asking, maybe unmute yourself and tell us what you did. Or am I putting you on the spot? I might be putting her on the spot. So we'll go ahead, and then maybe when we have a breakout, we can talk a little bit more in detail about it.
That sounds good. Carly, I'm not sure we've seen you since Baltimore. Okay, so we're going to put you in breakouts, and hopefully there'll be some distribution of people who've tried stuff. And I really just have three questions. We'll talk about what next as a group. 3 questions for you to look at, which is what have you tried? And also, what have you heard other people do? What are you planning? And we've kind of covered that. And most importantly, what do you need? What do you need going forward? Do you need technology advice? Do you need a format for a trivia night or something? Do you need some sort of testing Bible that shows what's been tried and what worked and what didn't work? So focus on those 3 questions. What have you tried or heard about? What do you have in your future? And what do you need? And as before, the first thing I'll ask you to do is pick someone to speak for your group. And we'd love to hear from every group and try to collect the wisdom this way and see where we go. Aaliyah, anything else before I send people away?
Whoever is the scribe, really pay attention to what do you need, because Mark and I are we're meeting with Debbie and Jasmine next week to talk about how we can help fill some of these gaps, how we can do some of this knowledge curation transfer. So please pay attention to that, because we'll be keeping track of those items.
And Jennifer, fair warning, I am going to ask you to speak up because I was at your event and I really, really enjoyed it. So we have 23 people. As before, Jasmine, Aaliyah, Deb, you will be sent to a small group, and I think we agreed that was a good thing. So I'm going to make 5 groups. And let's take 324. Let's take 15 minutes. If people seem to be running out of stuff to talk about, I don't think you will. Just someone hit the leave group button and tell me you're running out of things to talk about, and I'll call everyone back early.
Great, thanks, Mark.
All right, 5 groups. Have a great time. Welcome back. I hope that was a productive conversation. Um, let's get right to it. And let's start with Jennifer and Joe's group. And Jennifer, I don't know if you're the official spokesperson for your group, but if you could just say a word or two about your event and how it did as a fundraiser and what you feel like you learned. Why don't we start there?
Certainly, and I am the official spokesperson for the group, although I think I talk too much in the group, so I don't have as many of the, the ask, which was what supports are needed, but I do have a few, so I'll share those with you in the chat. But Maryland, we have for 15 years done a luncheon, and to something Mark said earlier, I've kind of wanted the luncheon to die long before COVID, and COVID put the stake through the heart, so I wasn't, really that upset. The luncheon, however, did, in its heyday, it brought in around 75,000 net. It had been dropping. It was bringing in about 45,000. And that was sort of due to some board attrition and some big donors, just going on, being on their way out. But so that luncheon was and had been a fairly significant fundraiser. We knew shifting virtual that we were at risk of not bringing in that same amount of money. So we weren't necessarily banking on this to be the equivalent of the luncheon. It was more, we wanted to be able to show some event revenue, and we wanted to try virtual in case we're also doing it next year. We wasted a lot of time, and that's no one's fault but my own and my board, because every single board committee call, we would change our idea for the event. Like it kept changing. So we wasted a lot of time, and I think that's the biggest lesson learned. Don't assume, which I maybe naively did, that because it's virtual, you can plan it more quickly. It actually is going to take more time to plan it because it is so new. So give yourself the time. And then we didn't have the time to promote it the way we would have wanted to. I actually really like how our event itself came together, and the board said that the event did a better job sort of elevating ACY and what we do. It did a better job than any of the luncheons ever did. And I agree with that. And we wanted to strike the balance between being engaging and being fast paced and lots of movement, but also keeping that IT side fairly simple. So we pre-recorded, it was a 36-minute video, and it was like a bunch of different people. Every person was like 2 to 5 minutes. And I can actually share the link to that recording if anyone wants to watch it. And so the good thing about it was you had the spoken word artist who was a youth who opened us up. And then you had a policy director, which, risks getting pretty wonky, but then it shifted to the musician, who, as I shared on my breakout, was very easy on the eye for the ladies. So I think that helped with the people keep staying engaged. And then it would be another policy director, bordering on wonky, and then goes back to this very, very smart, put together musician. So it kept it pretty engaging. And most of the feedback was that like people really did stay engaged, and it just kept changing. Like nothing was more than 5 minutes. And then to keep the audience participation, we did Q&A at the end. And that went fairly well. We actually, once people started asking questions, we got lots of questions. It was awkward at first because people weren't. So that was a little bit scary. We kept all audience participation to the chat. We tried to follow all the tips on keeping Zoom as safe as could be. And then I did make a plug at the end before we shifted to the Q&A of, please donate. So all in all, we met our goals, which were very modest. We had more than 30 people on the call. We netted about 5,000, a little over 5,000. And we did see some donations come in after. What I'm excited about is we'll also have this video that we can use to tell our story sort of again and again and again. And I think we'll get continuing returns off of that as we sort of deploy it. So that was our big takeaways. But the big takeaways, it'll take more time than you think. And we had so many run-throughs. My staff, my comms director and my operations director, who are much smarter than me, kept saying, nope, let's schedule another run-through. Let's schedule another run-through. And I'm like, oh, it's just, come on. But they were right, because like the run-through showed what wasn't working, what we had to cut. We had some ideas that dropped out. Like schedule a lot of practice runs to make sure you're going to be able to make it all come together.
One of my big takeaways from it, Jennifer, being a Marylander, I couldn't not go, by the way,
Yeah.
was the last young woman who spoke is a natural.
Yeah.
I would just watch her as someone who, she had the pacing exactly right. She had the level of complexity, exactly right. It was, if I was going to teach public speaking, I might grab that clip. I just wanted to share that.
Yeah.
What else came out of your group?
So some of the questions that came up, certainly are around, what was the videography that we used? How did we sort of put that program together? My communications director made sure that we had like these transition splash pages and the lower third, name and title, and then the banner came on with the donate, acy.org. So there was a lot of like tech work that went into the evening being a success that I think if we didn't have our comms director, we couldn't have done it. So I think that's a huge ask for you and Aaliyah, is like helping think through the program, and then how do we get that technical support to make sure that if people are going to do these recorded segments, that they look really professionally done.
I think that's great. I think that's great. Anything else pop up on the needs side before I let another group speak?
I mean, the first person who sort of launched our conversation said they sort of need everything. And I will attest to having, Mark and Aaliyah's thought partners through it was really helpful, because as much as my board struggled to figure out what we were doing, having them to back me up and then also them to help think through the event was really important. So, to the we need everything question, I think that's an important piece. Okay. And I might have missed other needs, so I apologize to my group if I did.
And hopefully we'll have a few minutes to just let people popcorn things out. I'm going to move on to Ryan's group. I think it was group 2, actually. Ryan, that doesn't mean you have to speak. It's just the name I remember from the group.
I would rather someone else did, because there's a little bit of construction going on outside.
Someone else from Ryan's group want to step up? Joe, your dog's adorable.
I'm happy to. I'm Nicole from Kids Forward, and we talked about. I think folks have not really decided and are considering virtual events right now. We did one last year at Kids Forward, and it was not set up in this same way where everybody joins an activity all at one time. We had actually set it up as a month-long virtual campaign to help us raise money and promote doing an action for, the event is called Step Forward. So to promote doing an action to step forward for kids. And the way this came about is that I started with the organization in September, thinking that I would have 3 weeks to prep the final details on this annual event that Kids Forward always did, and get to go to the event and meet all of the major donors. And my first 10 minutes in the office, they said, hey, we decided you're going to make it into a virtual event instead of, because we couldn't pull the event together. And so so we sent out, we had some elements of a regular event. We sent out paper invitations. We did a series of email blasts about the event. We did social media ad buys, and we were able to, instead of keeping it within our Madison, Wisconsin community, we were able to open it up to the entire state. So that was helpful in securing new donors for the event itself. And then yeah, we raised about, so the budget was $50,000, and when we had to make the change happen so quickly, I said, well, why don't we make that $40,000? And we came in at 43, and our expenses were 3,000. And so the expenses were a lot less than they had been before. And so we're looking at how we can reformat a little bit this year. And I think that we may have a live portion where everybody can join in at one time for this year and do it a little bit differently, make some updates. And then in the meantime, what we're doing right now is we're organizing a major donor and prospective major donor virtual coffee that's taking place in 2 weeks. And the invites just went out yesterday, and we've already got handful of people that have registered for it. So we're doing an update on how policy is critical for racial equity. And so that's happening in the next 2 weeks so that we can keep engaging folks in the meantime.
Any vulnerable asks for advice from this group?
Yeah, I think one of the asks that everyone agreed on was how to center some donor acquisition activity in this virtual context. You know, when you don't have the same way to build relationships that you normally do, it's a little more challenging to figure out how you can bring new donors on board, and nobody wants a Zoom bombed meeting that they've posted on social media somewhere. And so I think donor acquisition was the ask.
That's great. That's great. Let's move on to Aaliyah's group. I'm guessing Aaliyah's not the spokesperson for the group.
I'm the spokesperson. I'm Ann Disher with the Child and Family Policy Center in Iowa. And hi Mark. We haven't done a lot of virtual events, so I volunteered to sort of be the reporter out because I knew I probably wouldn't have a lot of brilliant insights to share. And we were fortunate to have Carly from Colorado in our group who did talk about the event that they had done, which was not a fundraising group, but a pretty significant virtual event replacing what would have been an in-person retreat of their It's About Kids network. And so they did in fact send out gifts in advance to folks who participated, and they also did virtual gift cards for lunch so that people could, you know, bring in something delicious to eat while they were participating. And I think the thing that really struck me about that event, and it sort of mirrors some of what we've heard about, is they used a couple different platforms. Some that just pushed content out, and then they used Zoom for more breakouts and participation, and that same sort of moving quickly from event to event, putting in breaks. They had like a ballet recital or a musical recital involving kids, music on when people joined in, breaking up the policy sessions, right? And I think the thing that she talked about was the need to really prepare speakers for what it's like to participate in a virtual event, because you don't get that live feedback that you would in front of an audience, and just really making sure you've got enough capacity to manage interactive stuff, to manage, like maybe have someone just on the chat function so that the presenter is not having to do that. And I think we talked a little bit in our group about sort of the relationship between non-fundraising events and fundraising events. And I think Carly agreed that actually it was sort of nice for them to start with a non-fundraising event, get their feet wet a little bit. And now they're working on an event coming up that will have more of a fundraising ask. And I know for us, we have a lot of my ask is we have some big organizational changes coming, and we'll almost surely do a virtual event in lieu of what might have been an in-person event. And so sort of, again, weaving that, an event that it's not only around fund developing, but we would certainly want to have an ask in there, and sort of how do you take all the possible ideas in the world and sort of limit them down to what's achievable and meets multiple goals.
I would urge you to book a coaching session with Aaliyah or with me to talk that through.
I would love that.
And just a couple of other things out of our group in terms of needs. What other things to make it exciting, right? And then I thought Carly made a really good point, how to handle the ask. Like when you're in a virtual event, how to keep that pressure and excitement moving around the ask.
Awesome. Let's move to Jasmine's group.
It says I'm muted, so there we go. Now I'm unmuted. I'm Eric Kilbride, and I am consulting with McCoy here in Indianapolis. And you heard my colleague earlier, Maddie, reference we did a trivia event in late May. Again, really off-brand. It was more about, hey, let's just all relax and maybe have some fun. And we really used a golf outing model. So there were 6 rounds. We got a sponsor each round. You know, again, that kind of price point that a whole sponsorship typically is. It was much more local. So we had a we had actually people that had never given to McCoy actually were all of our round sponsors because they were local restaurant or they were local insurance, realty, you know, things like that. So it just had a different appeal than maybe our other events that were more the gala format. I won't go through all of it, but just know that it was similar to that. So there are multiple giving options, much like a mulligan in the golf outing. You could buy hints, you could buy points if you really wanted to win, you could, you know, things of that sort. Best team name, social media, best, you know, all those kinds of things. Ways to engage folks into the event. Very simple, very light on the hey, we're McCoy, this is what we do kind of thing, and really just about having fun. And it did promote a lot of follow-up. Challenges to that particular model right now was didn't have a lot of board engagement because we didn't have a ton of runway to promote the event. Because of the nature of online trivia, there's usually somebody that enters for one fee and they have a big team maybe on Zoom happening elsewhere, and we don't know who they are necessarily unless they have given during the event. So we don't have a real clear understanding of how many people are actually participating outside of, you know, those kinds of things. So that's a downside in terms of follow-up and cultivation later. In our room, we're both of the organizations in our room are considering, well, not considering, we're definitely going to do a virtual fundraiser in November. We pulled the plug on the live concept. We have some ideas, some of which are a mixture of things that have been mentioned already here. But for us, and what I'm showing up here is really looking at executing. I'd love to see how the delivered dinners go if it happens before our event, because I aspire to something like that. But then Jasmine gave really good idea that she had seen some other places about soliciting recipes and drink recipes and things like that, and then having these small dinner parties that could be collectively, you know, done on Zoom periodically through the evening or something. So anyway, that's kind of where we were. The other folks in the room are new and didn't really want to listen, so I got to speak a lot. So that's more or less kind of where we were. Jasmine, did I leave out any other prompts?
No, I think you got it all. You did mention that there was a lot of savings on cost.
So I love virtual, the whole concept of doing virtual events, because for me as a consultant that does this, I love the fact that there's less risk than, I don't know, what we've experienced before with sunk costs and things like that. Which is why we pulled the plug, even though we have a 30-day out on a venue. I just rather put all our energy into creating something spectacular this way. And so the low cost or low risk, however you want to look at it, really appeals to me.
I just want to call out that we technically only have 2 minutes left.
Sorry.
I can stay no, that's not on you. I can stay after. I don't have a hard stop, and if anyone wants to stay, I'll be here as well. Aaliyah, no worries. This just ran a little longer. People had more to say than I thought, which is a good thing.
Fantastic.
We have one group left, but before that, Eric, you kind of lit up the chat. Everyone was so excited about some of the things you were doing. If everyone would send everything you've got to Jasmine to start out this process of disseminating, I don't want to call them best practices, but things that seem to be working. Let's create a gallery of stuff that's already been created. I think that would be a great start.
You could do it immediately after this call. That would be wonderful. And then we can figure out how to get these best practices out.
And Jasmine, you very helpfully put her email in the chat. And I would love to hear, Deb, from your group.
So my group included one group that had just finished their in-person event before the epidemic struck, one group that doesn't really have ongoing fundraising in general and is thinking about dipping their toes in the water, and one group that is trying to figure out how to replace a really big, effective in-person event. So none of us had tried online. Daniel from Texans Care for Children is thinking about replacing their event next year with a series of short, ongoing social media asks rather than an event per se. And we brainstormed a lot of things you could do with little 2-minute things like intersperse funny incidents from the ledge and kids activities and statements about how important your work is from legislators, and every week do something different. We talked about the importance of creating and putting content into a YouTube channel so that that would work, although I don't think you actually have to get subscriptions to it. You just send out the links to the particular YouTube document. And, you know, it was a more general conversation. I don't know that there were big takes. Everybody's interested in it. We're not sure where to go. I will say the partnership is trying to figure out how to put together 2 very different online non-fundraising events. We do not fundraise from individual donors because we do not want to compete with your fundraising, but we certainly need to put together the partnership retreat and an event for Spark. And so when it comes to thinking through using the technology, how to make it work, what's too much time, all of that, we're still right in there with you, even though we don't have the actual fundraising piece. But we played around with a lot of, you know, cute little ideas, getting kids in there. Maybe if your audience is younger people who have kids at home and are struggling with entertaining them, setting up a breakout room for the kids with a different entertainment activity there so that parents can pay attention to the grown-up thing was an idea that came up. Nikki and Daniel and Elizabeth, what am I forgetting?
That was a really good summary, I think.
I think that was a good summary. The one thing what resonated with me was just the general, our whole group acknowledged that a lighter tone is okay. It's okay to be a little bit off brand, which they mentioned even with like a trivia night.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we talked about the possibility of a trivia night. And one thing I've been thinking about is, you know, if you don't want to send dinner in advance, maybe you send some kind of gift package in advance for items they would use during the event collectively. Like Elizabeth was saying, maybe you do, I can't remember what group activity it was, family. I don't think it was charades.
A family, hold on a second. Now I've got to go look because I don't remember from one second to the next, like a talent show.
Right. So maybe you send everybody a package of the same talent show items, right? A top hat and a cane and who knows, and ask everybody to do a little family talent show with it, or I don't know. I mean, the point we were thinking of is that if you can make it lighthearted and creative and interactive and short and keep people engaged. And I'm just thinking, listening to everybody, a lot of it depends on the age of your audience, right? I mean, if your audience is older people who might not be comfortable with that and who really struggle with being online, you'd want a different approach. If you've got a younger audience that always has, you know, the kids on their lap, Carly, then you may need something to entertain the kids. So a lot of it is about knowing who your particular audience is, and maybe it's about doing separate events for different people, you know, different kinds of people who need different kinds of events.
One of the silver linings, I think, and it's coming out in what everyone is reporting, is one of the problems with galas and canned events is that they seem canned. They seem very institutional. Everyone's very guarded in what they say. And having dogs jump on your keyboard and kids coming in just gives things an authenticity and an informality, and creates a sense that this is more a gathering of friends, a gathering of family, than something that, you know, a car company would put on. So I think that authenticity is one of the big bonuses that comes with that. It is 4 minutes after 4. If everyone would send whatever you got to Jasmine, Deb and Jasmine, I will follow up to debrief and figure out what it is, what the right next steps are. And if anyone has any suggestions, please chat them in or shoot one of us an email. And I want to remind everyone, we have plenty of coaching slots left. if you have an event coming up and you want to think it through, please sign up. We would love to work with you. Deb, any last words?
I put a question in the chat box that Jennifer just responded to, which is, I can get Jasmine or Palani. I don't know if Mark and Aaliyah know this, but Palani is back with us just for the summer.
No.
Yes, I
Palani
cleverly
and Jasmine
snapped
could
her up
take
when
over
she
the world
graduated from
together.
Kennedy School until she gets a permanent job.
That's great.
Yeah, so one of them could take the recording of this and turn it into a quick fact sheet. And I see Jennifer thinks that would be helpful for her board, just with ideas to ponder and, you know, things you might want to use. Would other people find that useful too? Is that worth having somebody spend some time on, just kind of summarize all the different ideas that were floated here? I'm seeing a lot of yeses. Okay, we will save the recording and try and create one. We'll make it very clear that these are not proven practices, but rather interesting ideas that people are playing with. And I'll put on my little branded unrestricted funds are critically important to child advocacy organizations at the top to inspire boards to take the time and energy to investigate it.
And before everyone jumps off, this is the second time we've used this format of a little bit of presentation, a breakout, and reporting back. And I'm wondering if this is a useful format for everyone. Just chat in, and no is a perfectly acceptable answer. We don't want to keep doing something that's not useful. And if you have any thoughts later, let us know.
And if you have any other ideas about what would support your individual donor fundraising, send those to us. I mean, we are trying very hard to figure out how to help you guys do that. And, you know, ideas from you about what you do need or what you don't need, right? I don't want to waste our time and resources on things that are not helpful. Let us know so that we can keep trying to support you. I told the board shortly after the pandemic started that I thought at this point the partnership had 3 key priorities, and they all agreed. And those are getting you guys through the pandemic, supporting federal advocacy and the implementation of what we win in the census, and getting you guys through the pandemic. A critical piece of that is supporting your individual donor fundraising. So this is a very high priority for us, but we need to know what you need. So if you have any ideas for what would be helpful, please let us know.
And I think that's a wrap. Thank you all so much. Thank you for your experience and your creativity and your willingness to share.
Yeah. And good job on the stuff you're all thinking about. It's so exciting to hear you
great.
brainstorming. Yeah.
That's great.
So, take care, everyone. Have a great day.